Most people don't fail because they lack talent, they fail because they talk too much. They announce their goals, seek validation, chase attention, and lose focus before they even begin. While they're explaining, someone else is executing. While they're posting, someone else is building. While they're complaining, someone else is winning. This audiobook is about becoming that person. No noise. No validation. No excuses. Just quiet discipline, controlled emotions, and relentless execution. You don't need applause. You need results. Most people think they're making progress when they talk about their plans, but they're not. They're leaking energy. They're replacing action with words. That's the truth. You don't fail because you lack ideas. You fail because you keep announcing instead of executing. You say what you're going to do, you explain your next move, you share your goals, and your brain rewards you as if you've already done the work. That's the trap. That's why most people stay stuck. Talking is not doing. Talking is leaking energy. Remember that. Repeat it. Talking is not doing. Talking is leaking energy. You have a choice. Every single day, every single moment, you have a choice. Speak about it, or do it. You cannot dominate both. That's the key. When you announce your goals, you feel good for a moment. You feel productive. You feel committed. But nothing has actually changed. No discipline has been built. No consistency has been proven. No results have been created. Just words. And words are cheap. Execution is expensive. Execution requires effort, repetition, discomfort, and time. Talking requires none of that. That's why it's so addictive. That's why people keep doing it. But you're not here to feel good. You're here to become better. It's not about feeling motivated, it's about being disciplined. That's the shift. It's not about talking, it's about doing. That's the key. Look around you. The loudest people are always announcing something. Big things coming. New journey starting. This is my year. You've seen it. Everyone has. And then what happens? They disappear. They lose momentum. They quit. Because they already spent their energy talking. They already got their reward without earning it. But the silent ones? They move differently. They don't say much. They don't explain. They don't broadcast their plans. They just work. Quietly. Consistently. Relentlessly. And then one day, they show results. And people are confused. When did this happen? It happened when no one was watching. It happened when there was no applause. It happened in silence. That's the path. That's your path now. You don't need their permission. You don't need their validation. You don't need to tell anyone what you're doing. Because the moment you start explaining your plans, you invite opinions. You invite doubt. You invite distraction. And distraction kills execution. That's why silence is power. Silence protects your focus. Silence protects your discipline. Silence keeps you locked in. That's the key. You have a choice. Share your goals and weaken your focus, or stay silent and build real progress. Choose wisely. Here's what you need to start doing. The next time you feel the urge to announce something, stop. Pause. Catch yourself. That urge is your weakness trying to escape. That urge is your ego asking for attention instead of results. And you have to shut it down. Immediately. Replace the urge to speak with the decision to act. That's the habit you build. That's the discipline. You don't talk about going to the gym. You go. You don't talk about building a business. You build. You don't talk about improving your life. You improve it. Quietly. Consistently. Without noise. That's how you separate yourself. It's not about what you say. It's about what you repeat. Daily actions. Daily discipline. Daily execution. That's what builds results. Not announcements. Not intentions. Not plans. Actions. Only actions. You have to train yourself to become someone who executes without needing to talk about it. Someone who works without needing to be seen. Someone who improves without needing recognition. That's power. That's real power. And most people will never reach it because they're addicted to talking. Let's make it even clearer. From now on, you follow one rule: no announcement without evidence. If you haven't done the work, you stay silent. If you haven't built consistency, you stay silent. If you don't have results, you stay silent. That's discipline. That's control. That's how you rewire your behavior. Because once you remove talking, all that's left is doing. And that's exactly where you need to be. Understand this deeply. You don't need to prove anything with your words. You prove everything with your results. That's the shift. That's the mindset. That's the identity you're building. Not someone who talks. Not someone who explains. Someone who executes. You have a choice. Talk and stay average, or stay silent and become dangerous. That's the decision in front of you. And here's the truth most people avoid. No one cares about your plans. No one cares about your intentions. They care about results. Real, visible, undeniable results. That's it. So why waste energy talking? Why waste time explaining? Why seek attention before you've earned it? It doesn't make sense. And yet, people do it every day. That's why they stay stuck. That's why they don't grow. That's why they never reach their potential. You're different now. You see the pattern. You understand the cost. Talking is not doing. Talking is leaking energy. Repeat it until it becomes part of you. You don't need their permission. You don't need their attention. You don't need their approval. You need discipline. You need execution. You need results. That's the key. From this moment forward, your identity changes. You are not the announcer. You are the executor. You don't speak first. You act first. You don't explain your goals. You build them. You don't chase validation. You chase progress. Quiet progress. Consistent progress. Relentless progress. That's your standard now. At the end of each day, ask yourself one question. Did I execute, or did I just talk? Be honest. Because your life reflects your answer. Not your words. Not your intentions. Your actions. Always your actions. And if you're not where you want to be, the answer is simple. You've been talking more than you've been doing. Fix that, and everything changes. You have a choice. Every single day. Every single moment. Talk, or execute. Announce, or build. Seek attention, or create results. But you cannot have both. That's the key. And once you accept that, once you commit to silence, once you focus on execution, you become dangerous. Because now, nothing is wasted. No energy. No time. No focus. Everything goes into the work. You've mastered the first rule. Stop announcing. Start executing. But there's another layer. Because even if you stay silent, you can still be controlled. Controlled by the need for approval. Controlled by the desire for validation. And that will destroy your discipline just as fast. You stopped talking. Good. Now it's time to stop seeking approval. Now let's go deeper. Most people don't realize this, but the moment you start seeking validation, you lose control. Not slowly. Instantly. The moment you look outside for approval, you weaken your internal authority. You hand over your power. You trade discipline for attention. And that's a losing trade every single time. If they control your approval, they control your effort. Repeat that. If they control your approval, they control your effort. That's the key. Because now, you're not working based on your standards. You're working based on their reactions. Their likes. Their comments. Their opinions. And those things are unstable. They change. They disappear. They fluctuate. Which means your motivation fluctuates with them. That's why you can't rely on validation. You have a choice. Build internal discipline, or stay addicted to external approval. You cannot have both at a high level. Look at the pattern. You post something, and you wait. You check your phone. You refresh. You count the likes. You read the comments. And your mood shifts based on what you see. If people respond well, you feel good. If they don't, you feel off. That's emotional dependency. That's weakness. And it destroys consistency. Because now your work is tied to feedback, not discipline. That's dangerous. It's not about how you feel, it's about what you do. That's the shift. It's not about validation, it's about discipline. That's the key. You don't need their permission to move forward. You don't need their approval to stay consistent. You don't need anyone to agree with your path. But when you seek validation, you start adjusting your behavior to fit what people expect. You stop doing what's necessary, and you start doing what's acceptable. And that's how people lose themselves. Slowly, quietly, one decision at a time. They choose approval over growth. They choose comfort over discipline. They choose visibility over progress. And they stay average. You have to break that pattern. Completely. Not partially. Completely. Because partial discipline doesn't work. Either you depend on validation, or you don't. You have a choice. And the choice is simple. Do you want control, or do you want approval? Because you cannot chase both. That's the key. Think about this. The strongest work you will ever do will go unseen. The hardest days will have no audience. The most important habits will happen in silence. No one will clap for your consistency. No one will reward your discipline in real time. That's reality. And if you can't operate without recognition, you will quit. Not because you're incapable, but because you're dependent. And dependency kills progress. So you need to build something stronger. Self-validation. Internal approval. The ability to look at your own effort and say, that's enough. That's progress. Keep going. Without needing anyone else to confirm it. That's power. That's real power. And most people never develop it. Because they're too busy chasing reactions instead of results. Here's what you need to do. Stop checking for approval. Reduce it. Then eliminate it. You don't need to post everything. You don't need to share every step. You don't need to update people on your journey. That's not discipline. That's performance. And performance is not progress. It's not about showing, it's about becoming. That's the key. Next, build a private standard. A rule system that only you follow. For example, I train 5 days a week. No matter what. No excuses. No audience. No validation. Just execution. Or I work on my craft for 2 hours daily. Again, no negotiation. No explanation. Just discipline. That's how you shift from external to internal control. That's how you rebuild your authority. Because right now, if you're honest, your effort increases when people are watching and decreases when they're not. That's the truth. And that's the problem. You need to reverse that. Your effort must stay the same, regardless of attention. Whether people see it or not. Whether they support you or not. Whether they care or not. That's discipline. That's consistency. That's what separates you. You have a choice. Perform for people, or perform for your standards. Seek approval, or build control. Wait for validation, or create results. But understand this clearly. The more you need validation, the weaker your discipline becomes. And the stronger your discipline becomes, the less you need validation. That's the trade-off. That's the equation. If they control your approval, they control your effort. Repeat it again. Let it sink in. Because once you understand this, everything changes. You stop chasing attention. You stop adjusting your path for others. You stop explaining yourself. You stop caring about reactions. And you start focusing on execution. Pure execution. Quiet execution. Consistent execution. Let's get practical again. From today, you measure your progress privately, not publicly. You track your habits, not your likes. You focus on inputs, not reactions. Did you do the work? Yes or no? That's it. No emotional attachment. No need for recognition. Just a clear standard. You either met it, or you didn't. And if you didn't, you fix it. Quietly. Without excuses. Because this is where most people fail. They want to feel supported before they commit. They want encouragement before they act. They want someone to believe in them before they believe in themselves. But that's backwards. You don't need their permission. You don't need their belief. You go first. You act first. You build first. And the belief comes later. From results. Always from results. It's not about attention. It's about discipline. It's not about approval. It's about execution. That's the mindset. That's the shift. That's the identity you're building now. Someone who doesn't need to be seen. Someone who doesn't need to be praised. Someone who doesn't need validation to move forward. And once you reach that level, something powerful happens. You become consistent. Not occasionally. Not when you feel like it. Always. Because now your behavior is controlled internally, not externally. And that's where real progress begins. That's where silent hustle becomes real. You have a choice. Stay dependent, or become disciplined. Stay reactive, or become controlled. Stay visible, or become effective. But you cannot stay where you are and expect different results. That's the truth. You removed the need to announce. Now you're removing the need for approval. And as you remove both, you become more focused, more stable, more dangerous. Because now nothing external controls you. Not attention. Not opinions. Not validation. Only discipline. And that's exactly where you need to be. But there's one more layer. Even with silence and independence, you can still lose. If your emotions control you, your discipline breaks. If your reactions control you, your progress slows. So now it's time to take full control. Most people don't lose because they lack skill. They lose because they can't control their emotions. That's the truth. One bad mood, one negative comment, one moment of frustration, and they break. They slow down. They quit. They react instead of executing. And that's why they stay stuck. Because emotional people are inconsistent people. And inconsistent people never win. You have a choice. You can let your emotions control your actions, or you can control your emotions and dominate your actions. You cannot have both. That's the key. Understand this clearly. Discipline requires emotional neutrality. Not motivation. Not excitement. Not temporary energy. Neutrality. Stability. Control. You don't need to feel good to execute. You need to be controlled. That's the shift. It's not about how you feel. It's about what you do. Repeat it. It's not about how you feel. It's about what you do. That's the key. Calm mind, sharp execution. Calm mind, sharp execution. Say it again. Calm mind, sharp execution. Because when your mind is calm, your actions are precise. When your emotions are controlled, your discipline becomes consistent. Look at your own pattern. When you feel motivated, you work hard. When you feel tired, you slow down. When you feel criticized, you hesitate. When you feel frustrated, you stop. That means your emotions are in control. Not you. And that's dangerous. Because emotions are unstable. They change constantly. And if your actions depend on something unstable, your results will always be unstable. That's why you need control. That's why you need discipline. You have a choice. React emotionally, or respond with discipline. That's it. Let's talk about criticism. This is where most people break. Someone says something negative, doubts you, questions you, and suddenly, your focus shifts. You start thinking about them instead of your work. You get angry, defensive, distracted, and your execution drops. That's what happens when you react. But winners? They don't react. They absorb. They stay calm. They use it as fuel. Silent fuel. That's the difference. Winners absorb, losers react. Repeat that. Winners absorb, losers react. That's the key. You don't need their permission. You don't need their approval. And you definitely don't need to react to their opinions. Because every reaction costs you energy. And energy is your most valuable resource. The more you react, the less you execute. The less you execute, the further you fall behind. It's simple. It's not about what they say. It's about how you respond. That's the discipline. Now let's go deeper. Emotional control is not about suppressing feelings. It's about managing them. It's about pausing instead of reacting. It's about creating space between stimulus and response. Something happens. You feel something. But instead of acting immediately, you pause. You observe. You detach. And then you choose your action. That's control. That's power. You have a choice. React instantly like everyone else, or pause and respond like someone disciplined. That's the difference. Here's a practical rule. Every time you feel a strong emotion, anger, frustration, doubt, anxiety, you do nothing. For a moment, you do nothing. You pause. You breathe. You wait. Because emotional decisions are almost always wrong decisions. That's the truth. You send a message you regret. You quit something you should have continued. You say something you shouldn't have said. All because you reacted too fast. That's why the pause matters. That's why control matters. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. That's the key. Emotions will come. They always will. But they don't get to decide your actions. You do. That's the identity you're building. Someone who feels everything but reacts to nothing unnecessarily. Someone who stays calm under pressure. Someone who executes regardless of internal noise. Calm mind, sharp execution. Repeat it again. Calm mind, sharp execution. Now think about consistency. Why do most people fail to stay consistent? It's not because they don't know what to do. It's because their emotions interrupt their routine. One bad day, and they stop. One setback, and they slow down. One moment of doubt, and they hesitate. That's emotional inconsistency. And it kills progress. But when you control your emotions, your actions stay stable. You show up anyway. You work anyway. You execute anyway. That's discipline. You have to train this daily. Not once. Not occasionally. Daily. When you don't feel like working, you work. When you're frustrated, you stay calm and continue. When you're tired, you adjust, but you don't quit. That's how you build emotional strength. That's how you become dangerous. Because now, nothing can shake you. Not opinions. Not setbacks. Not feelings. Nothing. Let's make it even more real. Imagine two people. One gets criticized and stops working for 2 days. The other gets criticized and works even harder in silence. Who wins? It's obvious. But the difference is not skill. It's control. One reacts. The other responds. One is emotional. The other is disciplined. That's the gap. And that's the gap you're closing right now. From this moment forward, you follow another rule. No emotional decisions. None. You don't quit when you feel like quitting. You don't react when you feel triggered. You don't slow down when you feel tired. You observe the feeling, but you don't obey it. That's control. That's the key. You don't need their permission to stay calm. You don't need perfect conditions to execute. You don't need motivation to move forward. You need discipline. You need control. You need stability. Because in the end, your outcome is not decided by your intentions. It's decided by your actions. And your actions are controlled by your emotions. Unless you take control, you have a choice. Be controlled by how you feel, or control how you act. React, or execute. Break under pressure, or stay calm and dominate. That's the decision. And once you master this, everything changes. Your focus becomes sharper. Your discipline becomes stronger. Your progress becomes consistent. Because now, nothing interrupts you. Nothing distracts you. Nothing controls you. Only your decisions. You've removed noise. You've removed validation. Now you're removing emotional instability. You're becoming quieter, sharper, stronger. But there's another layer to this. Because control alone is not enough. You also need structure. You need systems. You need discipline that operates even when your mind is tired. You mastered your emotions. Now it's time to master your habits. Most people are obsessed with what others can see, but they ignore what actually matters. They chase visible success and avoid invisible work. They want recognition without repetition. They want results without discipline. And that's why they never reach the level they talk about. Because the truth is simple. What you do in private determines what you become in public. Not what you say. Not what you post. Not what you promise. What you do when no one is watching. That's the key. No one sees the representatives, but everyone sees the results. Repeat that. No one sees the representatives, but everyone sees the results. That's how this works. You have a choice. You can perform when people are watching, or you can build when no one is watching. You cannot rely on attention to stay consistent. Because attention is temporary. Discipline is permanent. That's the difference. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Motivation fades. Discipline remains. Motivation depends on feeling. Discipline depends on decision. and decisions are under your control. That's the key. Think about early mornings. No one is there. No applause. No validation. Just you and your decision. Do you wake up and execute, or do you delay and justify? That moment defines you more than anything you show publicly. Late nights. Same thing. No audience. No recognition. Just work. Just repetition. Just effort. That's where power is built. Quietly. Slowly. Consistently. And most people avoid it because it's uncomfortable. Because it's boring. Because it's invisible. But that's exactly why it works. No one sees the representatives, but everyone sees the results. The workout no one witnessed. The study sessions no one praised. The hours of practice no one acknowledged. They all compound. Day after day. Week after week. Month after month. Until one day, the results appear. And people think it happened overnight. But you know the truth. It happened in the dark. It happened in silence. It happened when you chose discipline over comfort again and again. You don't need their permission to work in silence. You don't need an audience to stay consistent. You don't need recognition to keep going. That's weakness. That's dependency. And you're eliminating that. You have a choice. Depend on motivation, or build discipline. Depend on attention, or build consistency. One leads to temporary effort. The other leads to permanent growth. Here's the reality most people ignore. If your discipline only exists when people are watching, it's not discipline. It's performance. And performance is fragile. The moment the audience disappears, so does your effort. That's why you must build systems that operate without witnesses. Systems that don't care how you feel. Systems that don't depend on mood. Systems that don't require validation. That's how you become consistent. Start with routines. Simple. Clear. Non-negotiable. You wake up at a certain time. You train at a certain time. You work at a certain time. Not because you feel like it. Because it's scheduled. Because it's decided. That's the key. You remove decision-making. You remove emotional debate. You follow the system. Every day. Without exception. It's not about intensity. It's about consistency. That's the discipline. Most people go hard for a few days, then disappear. That's not power. That's instability. Real power is showing up daily. Even when it's boring. Even when it's hard. Even when nothing seems to be changing. Because something is changing. Internally. Quietly. You're building identity. You're building discipline. You're building control. You have to shift your focus. Stop asking, who is watching? Start asking, am I executing? That's the only question that matters. Because at the end of the day, results don't come from attention. They come from repetition. From consistency. From discipline in the dark. Let's make it practical. You create a daily standard. Not based on feeling. Based on action. For example, I complete my work session no matter what. Or I train regardless of mood. Or I study even when I'm tired. These are not suggestions. These are rules. And rules eliminate excuses. That's the key. Because excuses thrive in the dark. When no one is watching, it's easy to quit. It's easy to delay. It's easy to say, I'll do it tomorrow. That's where most people lose. Not in public. In private. That's where failure begins. Quietly. Repeatedly. Until it becomes a habit. And habits shape outcomes. But you're reversing that. You're building winning habits in silence. You're executing when it's inconvenient. You're showing up when it's uncomfortable. That's discipline. That's control. That's how you separate yourself. No one sees the representatives, but everyone sees the results. Let that stay in your mind. Every time you feel like skipping the work, remember that. Every rep counts. Every session counts. Every action compounds. Even when you can't see it yet. That's the process. That's the path. And understand this. You don't need immediate results to stay consistent. You need trust. Trust in the process. Trust in repetition. Trust that what you're doing in private will eventually show in public. That's how discipline works. Slow. Silent. Powerful. You have a choice. Chase visible success, or build invisible strength. Look busy, or become effective. Perform for attention, or execute for results. But you cannot fake this. You cannot shortcut this. Because reality always exposes the truth. And the truth is always in your habits. You don't need their permission to stay disciplined. You don't need recognition to stay focused. You don't need applause to keep going. You need structure. You need systems. You need repetition. That's the formula. That's the key. And once you lock into this, something changes. You stop relying on motivation. You stop waiting to feel ready. You stop needing external pressure. Because now, your discipline is internal. It's automatic. It's part of you. You've learned to work in silence. You've learned to build in the dark. And now, you're becoming consistent without anyone knowing. That's power. Real power. But there's another threat you need to eliminate. Because even with discipline, even with structure, you can still lose focus if you talk too much about your life to the wrong people. If you keep explaining, you weaken your position. You've built discipline in private. Now it's time to protect it. Most people don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because they talk to the wrong people. They explain too much. They share too early. They open their vision to opinions that were never qualified to judge it. And slowly, without realizing it, they lose clarity. They lose confidence. They lose momentum. That's the cost of over-explaining. Explaining your life drains your focus and invites doubt. Repeat that. Explaining your life drains your focus and invites doubt. That's the key. You have a choice. Protect your vision, or expose it. Stay focused, or get distracted. You cannot do both. Not everyone deserves access to your vision. Let that sink in. Not everyone deserves access to your vision. Just because someone is close to you doesn't mean they understand you. Just because someone listens doesn't mean they support you. And just because someone gives advice doesn't mean it's useful. Most people speak from their own limitations, their own fears, their own insecurities. And when you explain your goals to them, they don't see your potential. They see their doubts. They project their reality onto your future. And if you're not careful, you start believing them. That's how people shrink their dreams. Not because they want to fail, but because they listen to voices that were never meant to guide them. That's the danger. It's not about your idea, it's about your environment. That's the key. Your environment shapes your thinking. And your thinking shapes your actions. So if your environment is filled with doubt, hesitation, and negativity, your execution will suffer. You have a choice. Protect your environment, or let it control you. You don't need their permission to move forward. You don't need to explain why you're working harder. You don't need to justify your decisions. Because every explanation opens a door for opinions, a door for judgment, a door for distraction. And distraction kills discipline. That's the truth. You think you're just talking, but you're actually weakening your focus. You're dividing your attention. You're stepping away from execution. Look at the pattern. You tell someone your plan. They question it. Are you sure? What if it doesn't work? Why don't you do something safer? And now, instead of executing, you're thinking, doubting, hesitating. That's how momentum dies. Quietly, slowly, one conversation at a time. And it could have been avoided. All you had to do was stay silent. Not everyone deserves access to your vision. Repeat it again. Because this is discipline. This is control. This is protection. You don't share your goals with people who don't understand the process. You don't explain your moves to people who don't respect your direction. You don't open your mind to people who operate from fear. That's not arrogance. That's strategy. It's not about being secretive. It's about being selective. That's the difference. You're not hiding your life. You're protecting your focus. You're guarding your discipline. You're choosing silence over unnecessary noise. That's the key. Because the more you explain, the more energy you lose. And energy is everything. Without energy, there is no execution. Without execution, there are no results. Let's make this practical. From now on, you filter your conversations. Before you speak, you ask yourself one question. Does this person deserve access to this information? If the answer is no, You stay silent. Simple. No explanation. No justification. Just silence. That's discipline. That's control. You also stop explaining your progress. You stop updating people on what you're doing. You stop giving reports about your life. Because that's not progress. That's performance. And performance is a distraction. It's not about what they know. It's about what you do. That's the shift. That's the mindset. And here's the truth most people don't want to hear. The more you explain, the less you execute. Because explaining feels like progress. It feels productive. It feels like movement. But it's not. It's a substitute for action. Just like announcing. Just like seeking validation. It's the same pattern. Different form. And you're eliminating all of it. You have a choice. Talk about your life, or build your life. Explain your vision, or execute it. Seek understanding, or create results. But you cannot waste time doing both. That's the key. Your time is limited. Your energy is limited. Your focus is limited. So you must protect it. Aggressively. Not everyone deserves access to your vision. And more importantly, not everyone needs to understand you. That's where people get stuck. They want everyone to get it. They want everyone to support them. They want everyone to agree. But that's not required. You don't need universal approval. You need personal discipline. That's it. Because in the end, results don't need explanation. Results don't need justification. Results speak for themselves. Loudly, clearly, undeniably. And when you reach that level, no one will ask questions. No one will doubt you. No one will challenge your path. Because the proof is there. So why explain now? Why waste energy trying to convince people who don't understand? It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't help you. It only slows you down. Move in silence. Let results answer questions you never needed to explain. That's the rule. That's the discipline. That's the mindset you're building. You don't argue. You don't defend. You don't explain. You execute. Quietly. Consistently. Relentlessly. And when people finally see the results, you won't need to say anything. Because the work will speak for you. That's power. Real power. You have a choice. Keep explaining and stay stuck, or stay silent and move forward. Keep seeking understanding, or build something undeniable. But understand this. Every unnecessary conversation is a distraction. Every explanation is a leak. And every leak weakens your focus. So you close the leaks. You protect your energy. You protect your vision. You protect your discipline. That's how you win. You've removed noise. You've removed validation. You've built discipline in private. And now, you've stopped explaining your life to people who don't matter. You're becoming sharper. More focused. More controlled. But there's another trap waiting. A subtle one. Because even if you stay silent, even if you stop explaining, you can still fall into the illusion of success. The need to look successful instead of becoming successful. And that's where most people lose everything they've built. You've learned to protect your vision. Now it's time to protect your identity. Most people don't chase success. They chase the appearance of success. And that's why they stay average. They want to look disciplined instead of being disciplined. They want to look successful instead of becoming successful. They want the image without the identity. And that's the trap. The moment you prioritize how things look over what things are, you lose. Visibility is not victory. Repeat that. Visibility is not victory. That's the key. You have a choice. You can build something real, or you can perform something fake. You cannot do both at a high level. Look at the pattern. People showcase the highlights, the lifestyle, the wins, the surface-level signals of success. But behind it, there is no depth, no structure, no consistency, no real discipline. It's all curated. It's all controlled. It's all designed to impress. But it doesn't build anything. Because real success is not built in public. It's built in silence. It's built through repetition. It's built through discipline. And none of that looks impressive in the moment. That's why most people avoid it. Visibility is not victory. Say it again. Because this is where people get confused. They think attention equals progress. They think being seen equals being successful. But attention is temporary. Progress is permanent. Attention fades. Discipline compounds. That's the difference. It's not about appearance, it's about execution. That's the key. You don't need their permission to look successful. You don't need their approval to prove anything. You don't need to show your progress to make it real. Because real progress exists whether people see it or not. That's power. That's control. That's discipline. When you stop needing to be seen, you start becoming unstoppable. Think about wealth. Real wealth is quiet. It's structured. It's built over time. But fake wealth is loud. It's displayed. It's advertised. It's shown constantly. Why? Because it needs validation. It needs attention. It needs to be seen to feel real. But real wealth doesn't need that. Real wealth is secure. It doesn't depend on opinions. The same applies to discipline. The same applies to growth. If it's real, it doesn't need proof. You have a choice. Build something that looks good, or build something that lasts. Build something that gets attention, or build something that gets results. That's the decision. And most people choose attention. That's why they stay stuck. Because attention rewards appearance, not discipline. It's not about looking successful, it's about being disciplined. That's the shift. That's the mindset. That's the identity you're building now. You're not here to impress. You're here to improve. You're not here to perform. You're here to execute. And execution does not care about visibility. Execution only cares about consistency. Let's make it practical. You stop measuring your life by what others can see. You stop tracking validation. You stop chasing reactions. Instead, you track progress. Real progress. Skills improved. Habits built. Discipline maintained. That's your scoreboard now. Not attention. Not visibility. Not approval. Because once you start chasing appearance, your decisions change. You choose what looks impressive instead of what works. You choose what gets attention instead of what builds results. You choose short-term validation over long-term growth. And that's how people sabotage themselves. Quietly. Consistently. Without realizing it. Visibility is not victory. Let it stay in your mind. Every time you feel the urge to show something, ask yourself one question. Is this helping me build, or just helping me look good? If it's just for appearance, you stop. Immediately. That's discipline. That's control. You don't need their permission to stay invisible. You don't need to prove your progress. You don't need to show your work. Because your work will show itself when it's ready. That's the process. That's how it works. And the longer you stay focused on becoming, the stronger your results will be when they finally appear. Think about skill. Real skill takes time. Repetition. Failure. Adjustment. None of that looks impressive. None of that gets attention. But that's where mastery is built. Quietly. Slowly. And then one day, it shows. Effortlessly. And people are surprised. But you're not. Because you know what it took. You know what happened behind the scenes. That's your focus now. Becoming. Not appearing. Building. Not performing. Executing. Not showcasing. That's the discipline. That's the standard. You have a choice. Impress people, or improve yourself. Chase visibility, or build value. Look successful, or become successful. But understand this clearly. One leads to attention. The other leads to results. And only one of them lasts. It's not about image, it's about identity. That's the key. Your identity is built through repetition. Through discipline. Through consistent action. Not through posts. Not through presentation. Not through appearance. And once your identity is strong, results become inevitable. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop needing to show anything. You stop needing to explain anything. Because now, you're grounded. You're focused. You're disciplined. And that's enough. Visibility is not victory. Repeat it one more time. Because this will protect you from distraction. This will keep you grounded. This will keep you focused on what actually matters. You've removed noise. You've removed validation. You've stopped explaining. And now, you've outgrown the need to be seen winning. You're becoming quieter, more focused, more disciplined. But there's still one major threat left. The world is full of distractions, constant noise, endless information. And if you don't control it, it will control you. You've learned to ignore people. Now you must learn to eliminate noise. Most people are not distracted by accident. They are distracted by design. Every notification, every scroll, every opinion, every piece of noise is competing for your attention. And attention is your most valuable asset. Not time. Not talent. Attention. Because where your attention goes, your life follows. Where focus goes, results follow. Repeat that. Where focus goes, results follow. That's the key. You have a choice. Control your focus, or let the world control it. You cannot win if your attention is constantly scattered. Look at your day. How many times do you check your phone without purpose? How many times do you switch tasks before finishing one? How many times do you start something and then get pulled into something else? That's not normal. That's conditioning. You've been trained to lose focus. And every time you lose focus, you lose progress. Because progress requires depth. Progress requires concentration. Progress requires uninterrupted effort. And that's exactly what distractions destroy. It's not about time, it's about focus. That's the shift. Most people think they need more time. They don't. They need fewer distractions. They need stronger discipline. Because you can spend 10 hours distracted and achieve nothing, or 1 hour focused and achieve everything that matters. That's the difference. That's the power of focus. Where focus goes, results follow. Let that stay in your mind. Every time you get distracted, you're not just losing a moment. You're losing momentum. And momentum is everything. Once it breaks, it's hard to rebuild. That's why you must protect it. Aggressively. Without hesitation. You don't need their permission to disconnect. You don't need to respond instantly. You don't need to be available all the time. That's weakness. That's dependency. And it's destroying your ability to focus. You have a choice. Be accessible to everyone, or be committed to your goals. You cannot do both at a high level. Think about deep work. Real work. Focused work. The kind of work where you lose track of time. Where your mind is fully engaged. Where your attention is locked in. That's where mastery is built. That's where progress accelerates. But most people never reach that state. Why? Because they interrupt themselves every few minutes. Notifications. Messages. Scrolling. Opinions. Noise. Constant noise. Now compare that to fragmented attention. Starting something, stopping, checking your phone, coming back, losing your train of thought, starting again. That's frustration. That's inefficiency. That's wasted effort. And most people live in that state every day. That's why they feel busy but achieve nothing. That's why they're tired but not productive. You have a choice. Deep work or shallow distraction. Mastery or mediocrity. Focus or noise. That's the decision. And every distraction you allow is a vote for mediocrity. That's the truth. It's not about distraction, it's about discipline. That's the key. Because distractions will always exist. The world will not become quieter for you. You must become stronger within it. You must build the discipline to ignore what doesn't matter. To cut what doesn't serve you. To eliminate what weakens your focus. Let's get practical. You start by removing the obvious distractions. Turn off unnecessary notifications. Limit your access to social media. Create specific times for communication. Not constant access. You don't check your phone every few minutes. You check it at scheduled times. That's control. That's discipline. Next, you create focus blocks. Periods of time where you work without interruption. No phone. No messages. No distractions. Just you and the task. Even if it's 30 minutes at first. Then 60. Then longer. You build that muscle. Because focus is a skill. And like any skill, it improves with repetition. Where focus goes, results follow. Every focused session compounds. Every distraction delays. That's how it works. That's the system. You also need to understand this. Not all noise is external. Some of it is internal. Overthinking. worry, doubt, constant mental chatter. That's noise too. And it's just as dangerous. Because even if your environment is quiet, your mind can still be loud. That's why emotional control matters. That's why discipline matters. You have to train your mind to stay on task, to return to focus, again and again. You have a choice. Follow every thought, or direct your attention. Let your mind wander, or bring it back. That's discipline. That's control. And here's the truth. Focus is uncomfortable. Silence is uncomfortable. Sitting with one task, without distraction, without stimulation, it feels difficult. That's why most people avoid it. They escape into noise. Because noise is easy. Noise is entertaining. Noise is addictive. But noise produces nothing. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. That's the key. You don't choose what feels good. You choose what builds results. And results require focus. Deep, uninterrupted focus. You don't need their permission to protect your time. You don't need to explain why you're unavailable. You don't need to justify your focus. Because your time is your life. And if you don't protect it, you will lose it. Slowly, daily, through distractions that feel small but add up to everything. So you become aggressive. You cut the noise. You reduce the inputs. You simplify your environment. You remove what doesn't serve your goals. That's how you create space for focus. That's how you create space for execution. Where focus goes, results follow. Say it again. Let it guide your actions. Every decision you make either strengthens your focus or weakens it. Choose wisely. You've removed noise from people. You've removed validation. You've stopped performing. And now, you're cutting distractions. You're building focus. Relentless focus. The kind that doesn't break easily. The kind that produces results consistently. But there's one more element you need to master. Because even with focus, even with discipline, life will challenge you. Pain will come. Failure will come. Setbacks will come. And if you don't handle them correctly, they will break your momentum. You've learned to focus. Now you must learn to use pain. Pain is unavoidable. That's reality. You will be rejected. You will fail. You will be misunderstood. You will lose. And in those moments, most people break. Not because the pain is too much, but because they don't know how to use it. They expose it. They complain about it. They turn it into excuses. And slowly, that pain becomes weakness. But it doesn't have to be that way. You have a choice. You can expose your pain, or you can convert it into power. You cannot do both. That's the key. Suffer in silence, succeed in public. Repeat that. Suffer in silence, succeed in public. That's the discipline. Most people want comfort when they feel pain. They want support. They want sympathy. They want someone to tell them it's okay to slow down. And that's exactly why they stay stuck. Because comfort kills growth. Comfort weakens resilience. Comfort trains you to escape instead of endure. But growth requires the opposite. Growth requires pressure. Growth requires resistance. Growth requires discomfort. It's not about pain, it's about discipline. That's the key. Think about rejection. Someone says no. Someone ignores you. Someone doubts you. And your first instinct is to react. To feel discouraged. To question yourself. To slow down. That's the normal response. But normal doesn't win. Winners respond differently. They absorb it. They stay calm. They go back to work. They don't need to explain their pain. They don't need to broadcast their struggle. They convert it into fuel. Quiet fuel. That's the difference. Suffer in silence. Succeed in public. Let that stay in your mind. Because every time you complain, you release pressure. And pressure is what drives progress. The moment you start explaining your pain, you reduce its power. You turn it into a story instead of a tool. And tools are meant to be used, not displayed. That's the shift. That's the mindset. You don't need their permission to struggle. You don't need their validation when things go wrong. You don't need to explain every setback. Because setbacks are part of the process. Not an exception. Not a problem. A requirement. That's the truth most people avoid. They want success without failure. They want growth without pain. But it doesn't work like that. It never has. You have a choice. Use pain as an excuse, or use pain as fuel. Slow down, or go harder. Complain, or execute. That's the decision. And every time you choose discipline, you get stronger. Not just physically, mentally, emotionally. You build resilience. And resilience is what keeps you going when everything else tells you to stop. Let's talk about failure. You try something. It doesn't work. You fall short. And your mind starts creating stories. Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should stop. That's emotional thinking. That's weakness trying to take control. And if you listen to it, you lose. But if you control it, you grow. That's the difference. Winners don't avoid failure. They use it. They study it. They learn from it. And then they move forward. Without noise. Without drama. Without delay. It's not about failure. It's about discipline. That's the key. Failure is information. Pain is feedback. And feedback is valuable, if you use it correctly. But most people don't. They personalize it. They internalize it. They let it define them. And that's where they get stuck. You don't do that anymore. You observe. You adjust. You continue. That's your process. That's your system. That's your discipline. Now think about heartbreak, loss, disappointment, moments that hit you deeply, moments that shake you. These are the moments that define you. Not the easy days. Not the comfortable moments. The hard ones. The painful ones. Because that's where your character is tested. That's where your discipline is proven. Most people collapse in those moments. They lose structure. They lose focus. They lose consistency. But you don't. You stay steady. You stay controlled. You keep moving. Not fast. Not perfect. But consistent. That's resilience. That's strength. Suffer in silence. Succeed in public. Repeat it again. Because this is your new standard. You don't broadcast your pain. You don't turn it into content. You don't use it for attention. You use it for growth. Privately. Quietly. Relentlessly. You have a choice. Let pain stop you, or let pain sharpen you. Let pain slow you down, or let pain push you forward. But understand this. Pain is neutral. It doesn't define you. Your response does. That's the key. Let's get practical. When something goes wrong, you follow a simple process. First, you pause. No emotional reaction. No impulsive decision. Second, you analyze. What happened? What can be improved? Third, you act. You adjust and move forward. No delay. No overthinking. Just execution. That's discipline. Because the faster you return to action, the less power pain has over you. The longer you sit in it, the weaker you become. That's the truth. Movement creates momentum. And momentum reduces pain. You don't need their permission to be strong. You don't need support to stay disciplined. You don't need sympathy to keep going. You need control. You need resilience. You need the ability to move forward regardless of how you feel. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. That's the key. Comfort keeps you where you are. Discipline moves you forward. Pain is part of that process. Not something to avoid. Something to use. And once you understand that, once you start converting pain into fuel, something changes. You stop fearing setbacks. You stop avoiding challenges. You stop breaking under pressure. Because now, every difficult moment becomes an opportunity. An opportunity to grow. To strengthen. To prove your discipline. You've removed noise. You've removed validation. You've built focus. And now, you've learned to use pain. You're becoming stronger. More resilient. More controlled. But there's one final test. Because even with all of this, even with discipline, focus, and resilience, most people still fail at one thing. Consistency. Not for a day. Not for a week. But long term. Without recognition. Without reward. You've learned to suffer. Now you must learn to continue. Most people don't fail at the beginning. They fail in the middle. They start strong. They feel motivated. They take action. But then something happens. The excitement fades. The attention disappears. The results don't come fast enough. And slowly, they stop. Not because they can't continue, but because no one is watching. No one is clapping. No one is noticing. And that's where they break. That's where most people quit. The hardest part is not starting. The hardest part is continuing when no one notices. That's the truth. No applause. No audience. No excuses. Repeat that. No applause. No audience. No excuses. That's the key. You have a choice. Work only when it feels rewarding, or work regardless of recognition. Stay consistent when it's visible, or stay consistent when it's invisible. You cannot rely on attention to maintain discipline, because attention is temporary, but discipline must be permanent. That's the difference. It's not about motivation, it's about identity. That's the shift. Motivation comes and goes. Identity stays. That's the key. Look at your own behavior. When you get recognition, you feel energized. You push harder. You stay committed. But when that recognition disappears, your effort drops. Your consistency breaks. That means your actions are tied to feedback. And that's a problem. Because feedback is not guaranteed. There will be long periods where nothing happens. No results. No praise. No visible progress. And if you can't operate in that space, you will never reach your potential. No applause. No audience. No excuses. Let that stay in your mind. Because this is where real discipline is built. In the quiet phase. In the unnoticed phase. In the phase where nothing seems to be changing. But everything is changing. Internally. Slowly. You're building habits. You're building resilience. You're building identity. And identity is what drives long-term success. You don't need their permission to stay consistent. You don't need recognition to keep going. You don't need results to prove that you're on the right path. Because the process itself is the proof. That's the mindset. That's the discipline. You trust your actions, not your emotions. You trust your routine, not your feelings. That's how you stay stable. Most people are addicted to outcomes. They want to see results quickly. They want proof that their effort is working. And when they don't get it, they stop. But that's short-term thinking. That's weakness. Because real results take time. Real growth is slow. And if you're not willing to stay consistent without immediate feedback, you will never reach that level. You have a choice. Chase quick results, or build lasting discipline. Seek recognition, or build identity. Work for applause, or work because it's who you are. That's the decision. And once you choose identity, everything changes. It's not about outcome, it's about discipline. That's the key. You don't show up because you feel like it. You show up because that's what you do. You don't work because you're motivated. You work because it's part of your identity. That's the shift from temporary effort to permanent consistency. Think about this. The person who trains only when motivated will always be inconsistent. The person who trains because it's part of who they are will never stop. That's the difference. Identity removes negotiation. Identity removes excuses. Identity creates stability. So you start building identity. You stop saying, I'm trying. You start saying, I do. You don't try to be disciplined. You are disciplined. You don't try to stay consistent. You stay consistent. That's your standard now. No applause. No audience. No excuses. Repeat it again. Because this is your environment. This is your reality. Most of your work will go unnoticed. Most of your effort will not be recognized. Most of your progress will not be visible. And that's okay. Because you're not working for attention. You're working for results. Let's make it practical. You set non-negotiable standards. Daily actions that must be completed regardless of mood, regardless of outcome, regardless of recognition. You don't ask, do I feel like it? You ask, is this required? And if the answer is yes, you do it. Immediately. Without delay. That's discipline. You also track consistency, not results. Because results are delayed. But actions are immediate. Did you show up? Did you complete the work? Did you follow the system? That's what matters. That's what you measure. That's what you improve. Because once consistency is locked in, results become inevitable. Not instant. Not guaranteed in a specific time frame, but inevitable over time. That's how it works. That's the system. You have to accept this. There will be days where it feels pointless. Days where you question yourself. Days where you don't see progress. That's normal. That's part of the process. And those are the days that matter the most. Because those are the days where discipline is tested. Those are the days where identity is proven. You don't need their permission to keep going. You don't need validation to stay committed. You don't need visible success to continue. You need discipline. You need identity. You need control. It's not about recognition. It's about repetition. That's the key. Repetition builds habits. Habits build identity. Identity drives results. That's the chain. And once you understand that, you stop worrying about applause. You stop caring about attention. You focus on repetition. No applause. No audience. No excuses. Let it guide you. Let it push you. Let it remind you that the real work happens when no one is watching. That's where you separate yourself. That's where you build something real. You've learned to stay silent. You've learned to control your emotions. You've learned to focus. You've learned to use pain. And now, you've learned to stay consistent without recognition. You're becoming disciplined at a level most people never reach. But now comes the final step. Because all of this leads to one outcome. Results. Real results. And when those results come, you don't need to speak. You don't need to explain. You don't need to prove anything. Because results speak. You've learned to work in silence. Now it's time to let your results make the noise. Most people spend their lives trying to be understood. They explain their goals. They defend their choices. They try to convince others that they are serious, that they are working, that they are going to succeed. And in doing that, they waste energy. They waste focus. They waste time. Because the truth is simple. Results eliminate the need for explanation. That's it. That's the rule. When you win, silence becomes undeniable. Repeat that. When you win, silence becomes undeniable. That's the key. You have a choice. You can try to convince people with words, or you can prove it with results. You cannot do both effectively. Look at how most people operate. They talk first. They explain first. They try to gain belief before they've built anything. They want people to understand their vision before they've executed it. And that creates pressure. That creates expectation. That creates distraction. Because now they're managing opinions instead of focusing on execution. That's why they slow down. That's why they lose momentum. That's why they never reach the level they talk about. It's not about convincing, it's about discipline. That's the shift. That's the mindset. You don't need their permission to succeed. You don't need their belief to move forward. You don't need anyone to understand your process. Because your process is private. Your work is silent. Your discipline is invisible. That's how it should be. Because when it's real, it doesn't need validation. It produces results. And results speak louder than anything you could ever say. When you win, silence becomes undeniable. Let that stay in your mind. Because this is the final stage. This is where everything you've built starts to show. Not because you announced it. Not because you explained it. But because you executed long enough for the results to become obvious. That's how it works. That's how it always works. Think about transformation. Real transformation. The kind that shocks people. The kind that makes people say, "How did this happen?" It never happens in public. It never happens with constant updates. It happens in silence. It happens through repetition. Through discipline. Through consistency. And then one day, it becomes visible. And when it does, it doesn't need explanation. It doesn't need context. It speaks for itself. That's your goal. Not to be understood. Not to be validated. Not to be seen. To be effective. To be disciplined. To produce results that are so clear, so strong, so undeniable that no one questions them. That's power. Real power. You have a choice. Explain your journey, or complete your journey. Talk about your progress, or create your progress. Seek recognition or build results. But understand this clearly. Every time you choose to explain instead of execute, you delay the outcome. You weaken the process. You divide your focus. It's not about talking, it's about discipline. That's the key. You don't need to update anyone. You don't need to prove anything along the way. You don't need to share your process. Your only job is to execute. Daily. Quietly. Relentlessly. Until the results show. Because once the results show, everything changes. People who doubted you become curious. People who ignored you start paying attention. People who questioned you go silent. Not because you argued with them. Not because you convinced them. But because the proof is there. And proof ends conversations. When you win, silence becomes undeniable. Repeat it again. Because this is what you're building toward. A level of execution so consistent that results become inevitable. A level of discipline so strong that nothing can interrupt it. A level of focus so sharp that distractions lose their power. You don't need their permission to stay silent. You don't need to announce your wins. You don't need to explain your success. Because real success doesn't talk. It shows. That's the difference between those who make it and those who don't. Most people want to look successful before they are successful. You've already eliminated that. Most people want validation before results. You've already removed that. Most people want attention before execution. You've already rejected that. Now all that's left is the work. And the work produces results. Let's make it practical. You stop explaining your progress completely. You stop giving updates. You stop sharing incomplete results. You focus only on execution. And you let time do its job. Because time reveals everything. Time exposes effort. Time rewards discipline. Time turns silent work into visible results. Your only responsibility is consistency. That's it. Not recognition. Not validation. Not attention. Consistency. Daily action. Daily discipline. Daily execution. That's the formula. That's the system. And when the results finally come, you don't need to say anything. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to explain your journey. Because the outcome speaks. Loudly. Clearly. Permanently. You have a choice. Stay in the cycle of talking and explaining, or step into the cycle of execution and results. Stay visible and average, or stay silent and become exceptional. That's the decision. It's not about being heard, it's about being proven. That's the key. Words are temporary. Results are permanent. Words can be doubted. Results cannot. Words can be ignored. Results demand attention. When you win, silence becomes undeniable. Let that guide you. Let that remind you that the goal is not to speak. The goal is to build something that speaks for itself. You've removed noise. You've removed validation. You've controlled your emotions. You've built discipline in the dark. You've protected your focus. You've turned pain into fuel. You've stayed consistent without applause. And now, you've reached the final level. Execution without explanation. That's who you are now. You don't talk. You don't explain. You don't seek approval. You execute. And eventually, inevitably, undeniably, you win. And when you win, you won't need to say a word. Because the results will say everything. This is the end of talking. This is the beginning of proof. And now, everything you've learned comes together into one final decision. Will you go back to noise, or will you stay in discipline? Will you return to validation, or will you stay in control? You have a choice. And now, you know exactly what to do. Stop talking. Stop explaining. Stop seeking approval. Stop announcing moves you haven't made yet. Because every time you speak without action, you weaken yourself. This is your new rule. Move in silence. Work in silence. Suffer in silence. Grow in silence. And when it's time, win loudly, without saying a word. Remember this. No one needs to see your grind. No one needs to understand your vision. No one needs to believe in you. That's not their job. It's yours. So from this moment forward, you don't talk about discipline. You become it. You don't explain your goals. You execute them. You don't chase attention. You build power. Now here's your challenge. For the next 30 days, say less do more. disappear from the noise, and dominate in silence. Because the truth is simple. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. And the quiet one? They're the one winning.